SpongeBob is one of the most annoying characters on TV, so it's not a huge surprise that he's hated by so many people in Bikini Bottom. But it might surprise you to find out who. We're starting our list with Angry Jack, one of Bikini Bottom's angriest people. Or is he? I mean, this guy's entire existence is just built around screaming at people to buy his stuff. But in reality, he's super chill. Well, he was, until SpongeBob came along in the episode Shell Shocked. So, it's the middle of the night and SpongeBob is flipping out from some nightmare, shaking like he's freezing cold. He hears a creepy noise from the kitchen and he's freaked out. Is his nightmare coming true? Is he high on sugar? Yes, all of it. He tries calling for help, but of course, the phone's dead. So he grabs a tennis racket, shakes his way downstairs, trips over a toy truck, and lands flat on his face in the kitchen. Turns out it's just his chattering novelty teeth. What else could it possibly have been? But he's still all jumpy and ends up whacking his own boot with the racket, not realizing Gary's hiding in it. Poor guy gets tossed around and ends up with soap in his mouth, and SpongeBob realizes he broke Gary's shell.
Ooh, thank goodness. For a minute there, I thought you were hurt.
Gary isn't on our list today, but after all the abuse he suffered from SpongeBob, he could be. So now Gary's in pain, meowing, and SpongeBob's gotta figure out how to fix this mess he's created. He tries taping the shell back up, dressing Gary in ridiculous outfits, and even sticking a race car helmet on him. Nothing works, and Gary's more miserable than ever. Then Gary points SpongeBob to a shell catalog showing off some luxury model he wants. $9,595.95? Yeah, right, like SpongeBob can afford that on a salary given by Mr. Krabs. But then here comes Angry Jack. This guy's the king of discount snail shells, screaming in a cheesy commercial about his cheap prices. Typical salesman stuff. So SpongeBob and Gary head over, and Jack's actually pretty chill. Not even mad like in the ad. It's all marketing tricks.
Sorry, Angry Jack. Gary here needs a new shell, and we knew you'd help us find one. Hey, shouldn't you be yelling at me right now?
Nah, I just do that to make my commercials louder. And louder is the same as better!
Jack finds a perfect shell for Gary, but SpongeBob somehow manages to break it. And the next one. And the next 3,000 shells he tries. He's a major liability. Jack's losing it and finally throws SpongeBob one last indestructible shell, and yep, SpongeBob breaks that too. Now, Jack's done. He demands payment in the form of one arm and leg, also a heart and one eyeball, and his pants. Okay, well, so he's not Angry Jack, he's Black Market Organ Donor Jack. Interesting. SpongeBob stumbles home broke and carrying a sad, shellless Gary. He tries a cardboard box, which just makes things worse. Then he bumps into Mr. Krabs, who's dumpster diving for some reason. In desperation, SpongeBob begs for help, offering to work for free all year, and Krabs cuts his health insurance as part of the deal. Hey, gotta take the chance while you have it. All things considered, Jack actually had a pretty fair reason to hate SpongeBob. I mean, he trashed the place and shattered every shell in the shop with no real consideration for the guy's business. I'd say SpongeBob had it coming. Heck, why not? I hate SpongeBob too! But not everyone has a good reason to hate SpongeBob. Some people really just want to see him suffer, like Kevin C. Cucumber. Like in the episode I'm Your Biggest Fanatic, in which SpongeBob wants to be part of a jellyfishing community, but Kevin decides he's too much of a dumbass to be involved.
Hi, Kevin.
Hello, loser.
So SpongeBob and Patrick hit up this big deal jellyfish convention, and while Patrick's busy annoying the hell out of the security guy by poking everything, SpongeBob's fangirling hard over the jelly spotters. They're some weird jellyfish hunting crew that's famous for some reason. The big man in charge? Kevin C. Cucumber. And yeah, this dude's a total tool, full of himself, wearing this ridiculous crown and thinking he's king of the jellyfish world. I mean, he might be, you know. The crown doesn't go with any outfit, bro. SpongeBob's all over him, practically drooling, so Kevin figures, why not mess with this little weirdo, and ropes him into a bunch of tests which he claims will see if SpongeBob can join them. Although, of course, they have no intentions of welcoming him in. First test, catch a jellyfish. But SpongeBob nails it instantly, and Kevin gets stung for his troubles. So he keeps raising the stakes. 2 jellyfish, 20 jellyfish. It doesn't really matter. They just flock to SpongeBob like he's a jellyfish magnet. Kid's a natural. Every time SpongeBob's crushing it, and Kevin's catching more stings than he can count. Then Kevin really goes for it, whipping out a final test that's basically designed to fail. He ties SpongeBob to a post and gives him this queen jellyfish call whistle, which, get this, just sounds like loser over and over, and bails.
Loser, loser.
Hey, I've heard this call before.
He thinks the queen won't show up, and if she does, she'll definitely kill SpongeBob. But wouldn't you know it, a queen jellyfish actually shows up, and SpongeBob realizes Kevin ditched him just in time for the queen to chase him to the edge of a cliff. Yep, the queen's gonna kill him. But here's the kicker. The queen's a robot with Kevin and his lackeys inside laughing their asses off. Yeah, the whole thing is a damn lie. They start calling SpongeBob a loser, thinking they've won, but then bam! The real king jellyfish shows up, sees his queen, and goes full revenge mode. Kevin freaks out, admits he knows jack all about jellyfishing, and finally SpongeBob takes over. He blows this big bubble pie for the king, and it's love at first sight. The king floats off happy, leaving Kevin looking like a total chump. Well, more than usual. Back at the convention, SpongeBob's learned his lesson, telling Patrick he's done hero-worshipping jerks like Kevin. Patrick's all proud as he drags his own tied-up hero, Jeffrey the Jellyfish, out of the place. I don't even want to try and work out what any of that is about. I think it's fair to say that Kevin and his buddies ended up hating SpongeBob a lot more after they got stung half to death. But hey, if you're gonna be a snobby little jerk, you kinda have to expect that. Jellyfishing is for nerds anyway. Oh, and as for nerds, even school is not a safe place for a jellyfishing nerd like SpongeBob. Which is pretty much exactly what the very violent Flats the Flounder believes in The Bully. An episode where Flats joins class for the first time and decides, based on absolutely nothing, that he hates SpongeBob and wants to hurt him. A lot. Repeatedly. So, this whole mess kicks off with SpongeBob at boating school, just trying to survive another day with Mrs. Puff, when in walks Flats the Flounder. He's some new kid, and what's his first greeting?
Tell the class something about yourself, Flats.
Well, I like to kick people's butts.
Okay, so he's not the most charming person in Bikini Bottom. SpongeBob is too naive, though, and he thinks all of this is some twisted flounder humor and laughs it off. But nope, Flats is dead serious. He's got one mission, and it's pounding SpongeBob into the ground, to a pulp, mush, blood if he has it. So SpongeBob naturally freaks out and tries to get some backup, first from Patrick, but it turns out Flats and Patrick go way back to community college. And apparently Patrick would never protect his current best friend over someone he knew years ago. Mrs. Puff? She buys Flats' BS that kicking your butt is just flounder lingo for making friends. Actually, I think she might just be rooting for him to actually kick SpongeBob's ass. Even Flats' dad turns out useless when he cowers away, convinced his son is gonna kick his ass now too.
Now he's gonna kick my butt.
So all of Bikini Bottom, useless as ever. SpongeBob takes off into town with Flats hot on his tail. He even tries to mow SpongeBob down with a garbage truck. But SpongeBob drops a banana peel and bam, Flats crashes and lands himself in the hospital. So what does SpongeBob do? This idiot spends 5 hours giving Flats CPR trying to be a hero or something. Damn it, SpongeBob, you'd think Flats would be grateful, but no! He gets right back up and is like,
"Wow, I'm touched. I'll have to remember that when I'm kicking your butt."
Finally, Flats corners SpongeBob in his house and starts wailing on him, getting his wish. But it's all wrong. He starts realizing that SpongeBob's squishy sponge body just absorbs every punch like he's hitting a damn marshmallow. It's just not even registering on SpongeBob's body. Flats goes at it for a solid week before he finally passes out from sheer exhaustion. Just when SpongeBob's classmates start cheering him on as some weird kind of hero, he tries to give this big speech on how violence is wrong, only to end up clenching his fist right as Mrs. Puff walks in. Horrible, horrible timing as always. Mrs. Puff takes one look at the scene, and unconscious Flats, SpongeBob with a fist, and just snaps. "SpongeBob!" she screams. "I'm gonna kick your butt!" Yeah, that sounds like what a teacher would say in this situation. I believe it. But before we deal with that whole Mrs. Puff mess, let's focus on Flounder, who now hates SpongeBob more than ever. In part because there's just no way he can ever kick this dude's butt. It's not the best reason to hate SpongeBob, I'll be real, but, well, I respect the commitment to violence. Well, a lot of people in Bikini Bottom have this kind of desire to hurt SpongeBob. Like Bubble Bass, your typical Bikini Bottom jerk who exists only to torment and torture SpongeBob. Most people in Bikini Bottom actually have good reason to hate SpongeBob, but Bubble Bass is one of the few who apparently just doesn't need a reason. Like in the next episode, Pickles. The episode opens with Bubble Bass slithering into the Krusty Krab, already on a mission to mess with SpongeBob's head. He makes this ridiculously complicated order, and like the overachiever he is, SpongeBob nails it. Or so he thinks. Actually, Bubble Bass finds the one thing missing: Pickles. Just like that, he flips SpongeBob's world upside down. SpongeBob, as we know, has literally nothing else in his life but his work, and that, in itself, is basically nothing.
The pickles should be right where they always are.
So SpongeBob goes into full-on meltdown mode. His brain hits the panic button and he suddenly can't remember how to make a Krabby Patty. It's like it's some kind of rocket science. Mr. Krabs tries to get him to chill, sending him home to rest and recover, but it's all just spirals for SpongeBob. Back home, SpongeBob is so out of it he can't even figure out the basic stuff. He can't find the door, can't sleep, and by morning he's a broken sponge. He's slamming Gary into the alarm clock just trying to turn the damn thing off. Again, more evidence of how Gary could be on this list. Meanwhile, Mr. Krabs has put Squidward in charge, which is a total disaster. Squidward burns everything, even the shakes, and the customers are running out screaming, mostly to save their own lives. Desperate, Mr. Krabs goes to check on SpongeBob, only to find him talking in some jumbled word salad. Krabs knows that it's bad for business, so he sits SpongeBob down and tells him he just needs to remember how to make a Krabby Patty. After what feels like a full mental breakdown, SpongeBob finally snaps back, remembering the magic formula. He hopes. When he's back at the Krusty Krab, he serves up Bubble Bass another Krabby Patty with full confidence, no missing pickles this time. But of course, Bubble Bass claims the pickles are still missing. SpongeBob has failed again? Damn it, SpongeBob, this is your job! But SpongeBob pays way too much attention to his customers, and he catches Bubble Bass hiding the pickles under his tongue with the old ones still there. Bubble Bass makes a break for it, and everyone's finally cheering for SpongeBob's comeback. Okay, so it's really the whole town that has no lives. But SpongeBob thinks they could cheer for Squidward too, which quickly turns into a loud round of boos. SpongeBob's cheering right along with them, thinking it's applause, while Squidward's just standing there dying a little inside. More than usual, anyway. So there you have it. Actual proof that Bubble Bass has no good reason to hate SpongeBob. He's just doing it because he feels like it would be fun to mess with the little spongy dude. And it is, but, you know, make a damn effort. Luckily for us, some people actually do make an effort while hating SpongeBob. Like Barnacle Boy, the so-called hero who just so happens to have a real hatred for SpongeBob himself. All he ever really wants is to enjoy a quiet life with Mermaid Man, where they don't have to do anything. But SpongeBob is just constantly intervening and getting them involved in dangerous situations. And sometimes, like Mermaid Man versus SpongeBob, it just becomes frustrating. The episode kicks off with a scene where Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy are tied up like captives. Mermaid Man starts telling Man Ray about the all-new Krusty Kids meal at the Krusty Krab and... wait, is this a commercial? Man Ray has no idea what it is, but Mermaid Man's hyping up this meal with a tiny burger, kid-sized fries, and a juice box. And somehow Man Ray's actually into it. He's chowing down, and all the kids are screaming with joy. Okay, so it's totally a commercial cheese. But then we cut to the Chum Bucket, and Plankton's absolutely furious about this whole thing. He's watching all the kids pile into the Krusty Krab, spending all their parents' money on this meal instead of heading his way. So what does he do? He hatches his latest harebrained scheme, mind control shampoo. Not a bad idea for a town entirely populated by hairless fish. But Plankton has thought that through. He's not after them, no. Plankton's now a one-man hair salon lathering Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy's heads so they'll turn on Mr. Krabs and Spongebob and badmouth Krabby Patties. It's a foolproof plan.
It's Professor Plankton's mind control shampoo!
Next thing you know, Mermaid Man's going off about how awful Krabby Patties are, and kids start streaming out of the Krusty Krab heading to the chum bucket for whatever Plankton calls food. Probably something gross. But SpongeBob's not about to let this nonsense fly, so he shows up with a truckload of fiber and literally crams it down Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy's throats to shake off their mind control shampoo. Gross? Yes. Effective? Definitely. Toilet? Ruined. Once they're back to normal, the kids hightail it back to the Krusty Krab. Plankton's all fired up, finally ready to serve his disgusting chummy joes, only to find himself screaming into an empty room as his entire customer base heads back across the street. Game over, man. You'll never beat the Krabby Patty. I mean, to be fair to Barnacle Boy, he's not quite as aggressive in his hatred of SpongeBob as he once was, but he has a very valid reason to not like the guy. I mean, once you've spent your entire life fighting crime, it's easy to understand how annoying it can get to have to deal with another SpongeBob non-crisis. The Tattletale Strangler is another one, although he wants to go a lot further than hating SpongeBob. Yes, he wants to kill him. The Tattletale Strangler actually has a legit reason to hate him, and also want to kill him. It's all in the episode SpongeBob Meets the Strangler. The episode starts with SpongeBob doing his little goody two-shoes thing at the Krusty Krab, cleaning up every piece of trash he can find. He catches some dude littering, and without thinking twice, he calls the cops on him. Yeah, that seems like a reasonable response. But then Squidward strolls over, sees who he just busted, and basically loses his mind. Why? Because that litter bug happens to be the Tattletale Strangler, the psycho criminal known for strangling anyone who dares to snitch on him. Now, I only have one question. Why the hell is he free? Squidward takes off like he's on fire, leaving SpongeBob, who's still clueless, chatting with the cops about his big bust like he's some kind of hero. And the cops, they're like, "Good luck, Tattletale," and bounce. Seconds later, the Strangler busts out of jail, dead set on squeezing the life out of SpongeBob. Obviously, SpongeBob is freaked out and tries to hire a bodyguard, but no one will touch the job. Everyone's way too scared of the Strangler to risk angering him. So, when some sketchy dude with a fake mustache shows up offering to protect him, SpongeBob's all for it. Surprise, surprise, it's the Strangler himself in a really shabby disguise.
Well, the maniac could be anywhere, wearing a disguise.
But SpongeBob's got errands to run, so the bodyguard gets dragged around all over town, unable to strangle him in peace. Don't you hate it when that happens? Finally, they get to SpongeBob's house and surprise party! The Strangler's attempts to get rid of SpongeBob are constantly interrupted by party guests and random arrivals, including Patrick, who starts to suspect he's actually the Strangler and runs off to turn himself in. Which weirdly wouldn't be that surprising. The actual Strangler, meanwhile, is about to lose it, so he just rips off his disguise, roaring his real identity to the world. SpongeBob still doesn't get that this guy is the big threat to his life, thinking it's cool he can rip off his mustache. The word party triggers the guests to come back, and the Strangler snaps, bailing through the wall. It's just not worth it. Every getaway plan he tries, SpongeBob's right there with him until the Strangler's only escape lands him right back in jail. Just when he thinks he's safe, Patrick shows up in his cell, clueless as ever and ready to bond over their crimes. Damn, so after all that, the Strangler's nightmare is just getting started. Karma. So yeah, in hindsight, it all makes a lot of sense why the Strangler would be so interested or enthusiastic about the idea of catching and killing SpongeBob for good, especially since he's going to jail anyway, partly thanks to SpongeBob. Killing him would just be a nice little sayonara to life on the outside. And don't make the mistake of thinking this guy is the only one out to murder SpongeBob. His own son has the same idea. Yes, I'm talking about Doodle Bob. And fair enough, honestly. I mean, SpongeBob spent the whole of the episode Frankendoodle trying to kill the guy. Let's get into that. So there's this artist floating on the ocean, just minding his business and sketching away. Suddenly, his pencil slips right out of his hand, plunging into the sea. He's freaking out, screaming, "No!" like it's his last possession on Earth, which, given that he's floating in the middle of the ocean, it actually might be. Meanwhile, the narrator's like,
Always bring a spare pencil.
SpongeBob and Patrick are busy playing rock, paper, scissors with Bubbles when this giant pencil crashes right in front of them. They're freaked out at first, but then SpongeBob realizes this thing is magic. Whatever they draw comes to life. Literally anything. Naturally, SpongeBob decides to doodle up a sketch of himself, and boom, Doodle Bob is born, which will come to be a big, big mistake. But it's no ordinary doodle. This guy's got an attitude. First thing he does, beats the crap out of Squidward and bolts off with the pencil, ready to wreak havoc. Alright, well, we'd all beat up Squidward, but taking the pencil is unnecessary. SpongeBob and Patrick try ambushing him, but Doodle Bob's too slick for them. SpongeBob finally gets the upper hand with the eraser rubbing Doodle Bob out, or so he thinks. But later that night, Doodle Bob's stray arm comes back, swipes the pencil, and redraws himself with angry brows and a serious vendetta. He wants to kill SpongeBob. So now the showdown's on. Doodle Bob's got half the pencil with the eraser, SpongeBob's got the tip. They're battling it out when Doodle Bob corners himself in front of a bookshelf. But then Doodle Bob steps on a piece of paper, trapping his foot. SpongeBob seizes the moment, traps Doodle Bob in a book where he'll stay sketched and contained for all eternity. Until he returns in a future episode, that is. So SpongeBob decides this magic pencil is too dangerous and hurls it back to the artist up on the surface. The artist's stoked, ready to get back to his masterpiece, but as soon as he starts drawing, snap, pencil lead breaks. Unlucky. And the narrator hits us with rule number 2, always bring a sharpener. Man, it's kind of crazy just how easy it is to make yourself hated when you try and erase someone out of existence, huh? It definitely makes sense why he holds such a grudge against his own father, his creator, his spiritual sponge. I don't even know what I'm saying at this point. But someone does know what they're doing and saying at all times. Sheldon J. Plankton. Obviously, he hates everybody associated with the Krusty Krab, but Plankton has an especially strong and unique hate for SpongeBob. I mean, nobody is more responsible for the Krusty Krab's success than SpongeBob, and Plankton will do anything to undermine him. Like in this next episode, which is capital F-U-N, fun. Literally, it's fun. The episode begins with the Krusty Krab in motion when all hell breaks loose and the alarms start blaring. Plankton's making yet another sad attempt to snatch a Krabby Patty. Another failure? Unlucky. Little dude's got a laser, blasts a hole right through the door, and he's out of there with the patty like a tiny green bandit. Of course, SpongeBob's on his tail, launching into this insane chase across town, finally nabbing the patty back while the whole town's cheering him on, leaving Plankton to sulk his way home defeated. Pretty much how it usually goes. Now, SpongeBob's got way too much pity for the guy, and in some moment of sheer insanity decides to befriend him. Yep, befriend Plankton. He has lost his mind. He invites Plankton out for some good old jellyfishing, and Plankton, seeing a chance to play this sucker, takes him up on it, egged on by Karen, his computer wife, who is obviously in love with him. Sure. Out in Jellyfish Fields, Plankton's head's still stuck on world domination, while SpongeBob's busy singing his ridiculous fun song, trying to show Plankton how to have fun without evil plans. To everyone's shock, it sorta works, because apparently Plankton doesn't know what good music is. Plankton even gets into the song, starts singing the friendship version, and for a minute he actually looks happy. Like maybe, just maybe, he's really changed.
F is for friends who do stuff together. U is for you and me. N is for anywhere and anytime at all.
Down here in the deep blue sea.
But Mr. Krabs is not buying this Plankton's a good guy act. He's convinced Plankton's up to something, so he sets up a little bait trap at the Krusty Krab. Plankton meets up with SpongeBob and sits there totally unfazed, staring at a Krabby Patty right in front of him, just ripe for the taking. SpongeBob drags him out to the movies, and Mr. Krabs is almost ready to believe Plankton's gone soft until he realizes the patty's gone. Busted! At the movie theater, Mr. Krabs shows up demanding everyone check their pockets. Sure enough, SpongeBob finds a Krabby Patty in Plankton's. Plankton tries a weak apology about friendship before bolting, tearing right through the movie screen. SpongeBob's sad, but Mr. Krab cheers him up with a fresh patty, and Plankton's flicked straight into Bubble Bass's hand, who almost eats him thinking he's a jelly bean. Look, all Plankton wants is to run a successful business, and it obviously eats him up knowing that Krabs hit the jackpot with SpongeBob. How can anybody ever get a more willing idiot? Someone who wants to take low pay to do repetitive, mediocre work in a subpar condition. If you relate to any of that, I apologize, but yeah, Plankton hates SpongeBob. But while Plankton's hatred stems from being jealous of how good SpongeBob is, our next person loathes him because of how unbelievably awful he is. I'm talking, of course, about Mrs. Puff. Mrs. Puff has put up with a lot from SpongeBob. He's her most consistently awful student, and that is never a good sign behind the wheel. But one episode shows her hatred above all others, Demolition Doofus. So SpongeBob is doing his usual damage at boating school. He's taking his driving test and ramming the same two cars over and over, puffing up Mrs. Puff like some kind of overinflated balloon every single time he crashes. It gets so ridiculous that she finally inflates to massive proportions, and the car goes airborne, slamming straight into the school's lighthouse and sending poor Mrs. Puff to the hospital for life. Yeah, this is a dark one. In the hospital, a doctor tells her that she's permanently busted. Her puffing sac is shot, meaning she can't even inflate anymore. Is that good? Bad? Who knows, but she decides from that moment that she hates him. When SpongeBob jokes about her being crippled, Mrs. Puff just loses it and tries to throttle him, and they have to tranquilize her so she doesn't actually kill him. Then, just to make things worse, SpongeBob's rambling gets him a sedative shot too.
Yes, everyone needs to relax.
Again, fair. But SpongeBob shows up again to cheer her up, bringing a whole bouquet of flowers, which only adds to the giant floral mountain he's already delivered. Mrs. Puff's clearly allergic, but he's not done. He shoves her into a wheelchair and pushes her down the hallway, stopping to gawk at some crazy derby-like scene happening in the hospital with muscleheads and gurneys fighting each other. Mrs. Puff, on the other hand, is just wishing they'd run over SpongeBob, and she's loving that thought a little too much. The idea of his death is very, very promising to her. Her laughing gets his attention, and she claims she's got an extra credit idea for him. Next thing you know, Mrs. Puff's got SpongeBob signed up for a demolition derby, convincing Captain Lutefisk that he's a menace behind the wheel and the perfect competitor. She sends him in there clueless as hell, him thinking he's just out to drive safely, while all the other cars go for his head. But all Mrs. Puff wants is for him to finally die. Well, somehow, by sheer dumb luck, he's smashing everyone to bits, wrecking all the other cars without even trying. How dare he live? Mrs. Puff, completely losing it, hijacks a monster truck to chase him down herself, hoping to squash him. But SpongeBob, still clueless, dodges her every move until the chase leads back to the boating school. They crash right into it, and somehow Mrs. Puff's puff returns just in time for the school to collapse on top of them both. So, maybe they both die at the end. The fact that Mrs. Puff actually fantasizes about killing her own student is a pretty clear sign that this unhinged woman hates him more than she can even say. And to be fair, he's a dangerous driver who's constantly crashing her boats and making her look like a terrible teacher. I think she has a fair reason. And to wrap up our list, we have to look at the one guy who hates SpongeBob more than anybody. It is, of course, the extremely grumpy, hate-filled Squidward Tentacles. Nobody can deny that he loathes SpongeBob above anybody else. Like every single part of every single day, he's thinking about how much he hates SpongeBob. And in this case, SpongeBob actually asks for it with how annoying he is. A great example? Dying for pie. It all starts with Squidward waking up from a wild dream where he's on an island, jamming out on the piano, and boom, SpongeBob ruins it by making his alarm clock bell go off. Squidward's like, of course he has to haunt my dreams now too. Guy cannot get away from this yellow brat. Anyway, Squidward rolls into work only to find out it's Employee Brotherhood Day, a made-up torture fest where everyone has to give each other handmade gifts. Lucky him, SpongeBob presents him with a sweater made of his own eyelashes.
Squidward, in honor of Employee Brotherhood, I present to you a gift. Ta-da!
I heart you.
Super serial killer-y, but okay. Squidward's horrified, dismissing the gift, and SpongeBob's sobbing like a baby. He then shoves another weirdly sentimental gift at Squidward, a sweater made from his tears. Okay, even weirder, really understanding why Squidward hates him so much. Squidward's so done with this handmade nonsense, so when he finds a bunch of pirate pies outside, he buys one to pass off as homemade. Turns out this pie is a full-on bomb. A bomb. Mr. Krabs nearly blows himself to bits just taking a crumb of it, and Squidward freaks out once he realizes it's a real explosive. And of course, who's got it now? SpongeBob. Clueless as ever, walking around the Krusty Krab pie bomb in hand. Squidward and Mr. Krabs rush in only to see SpongeBob has supposedly eaten the entire thing. That's not good. Now, Squidward's convinced his careless little gift has turned him into a murderer, and he's about to watch SpongeBob literally blow himself up from the inside. Squidward spends the day making SpongeBob's final hours count, doing everything on this absurd friendship list, even though he hates the guy. By sunset, Squidward's a complete wreck, expecting SpongeBob to detonate at any second. The sunset explodes, but not SpongeBob. Turns out he didn't eat the bomb after all. It's been in his pocket the whole time. Squidward is furious that SpongeBob wouldn't think to tell him that. But then SpongeBob trips and the pie bomb splats all over Squidward, setting off a nuclear explosion that levels the entire town. Squidward miraculously survives, battered and muttering, ouch. But make no mistake, he will never forget this. It's one of the best recurring jokes on the series. SpongeBob thinks Squidward is his best friend, and Squidward is constantly wishing that SpongeBob would be institutionalized, or die, or something. Everything that SpongeBob does only makes Squidward hate him more and more. And the fact that SpongeBob is so determined to be his bestie for life just means this is a lifelong torture.